Welcome back again. So now we're going to be talking about our exocrine glandular tissue. The two most common types are your sweat glands and your sebaceous glands. So there are two types of sweat glands. Sweat glands are also known as sudoriferous glands. We have eccrine sweat glands and apocrine sweat glands. And so here is a picture of a sebaceous gland from your textbook. And here is a picture of a sweat gland. So we have different types of glandular tissue, and we'll talk about what each of them does and why they're important. So first, let's talk about our sweat glands. Eccrine sweat glands, so like this one here, are coiled glands, and they release sweat to the surface of our skin. So they are not attached to any hair follicles or anything. They just go right to the surface of the skin. We have eccrine sweat glands all over our body. And so this is the sweat gland that releases predominantly water with dissolved solutes, like salt. Some urea will be in that fluid that leaks to the surface of our skin. And it helps to cool our body down. That's its function. Apocrine sweat glands release another type of sweat into hair follicles. Apologies, that was my son. So their sweat is a more oily sweat, whereas eccrine sweat or merocrine secretions are very watery secretions. Apocrine secretions are oily. So the sweat that they release is that kind of creamy sweat that most people associate with stress. And so here you have eccrine sweat glands that release sweat directly to the surface to cool our body off. Apocrine sweat glands are associated with our hair follicles, and they're found in two regions of the body. They're found in the genital region, and then they're found in the axillary region. These sweat glands become activated at puberty. And so the sweat that they secrete is more of an oily sweat associated with stress. A lot of people think stress, sweat, or apocrine secretions stink, but it's not really the secretions that are stinky. There are lipids in the secretions, which makes it more of a milky type of sweat. And bacteria on the surface of our skin like it. They eat it. They basically metabolize the stinky or the apocrine secretions and release the odor, which is where the stink or the smell comes from. And here's a cute little, Mom, can you wash the shirt? I just hung it in your closet an hour ago. I know, but these sweat glands should be registered as lethal weapons. Okay. The next gland that we'll talk about are sebaceous glands. Sebaceous glands also secrete directly into hair follicles, and they secrete oils. So the function of sebaceous glands is to produce oil that will lubricate the skin as well as the hair itself, and protect the hair and skin. These are also activated at puberty. One disorder associated with your sebaceous glands is acne. So sebaceous glands secrete directly into, and they produce holocrine secretions, so the entire cell breaks apart and becomes a secretion, into a hair follicle. If the hair follicle gets plugged, then the keratinized cells as well as the sebaceous secretions get blocked, and this causes a pimple. So you can see right here the pimple forming, and here you have an actual pimple. So all of that material has to come through and get released out so that it can heal. Or the cell will also be able to just heal itself by breaking down. The macrophages come in and clean everything up. So let's talk about the different functions of skin. I told you earlier that one of the most common functions of skin is protection. It provides protection from invaders getting into the body. It's the first line of protection. Both keratin and the acid mantle of our skin provide this protection. Keratin is a very strong protein that provides a waterproofing to the skin, but it also keeps pathogens from getting through. The acid mantle, which is produced by our sweat, causes bacteria that are living on the surface of our skin to not be able to replicate as effectively because of the environment. Other protections, the skin protects us from UV radiation, from harmful chemicals or other materials getting into our system. So another function of the skin is sensory. We can feel. So this is a Meissner's corpuscle, which is a touch receptor that is directly associated with the epidermis. So it's right here, and anytime we get anything pushing on the surface of our skin, we're going to send a response through this cell, this nerve cell, to our brain, and we will recognize that as touch. Our skin functions in thermoregulation, which I've talked about a few times, but I'll just quickly show you this because it's a good picture. Our skin is going to, our blood vessels in our skin will vasoconstrict when we don't want heat to be released from our body. So think of, cold environments. And they vasodilate when we do want the heat to be released, so when we're exercising. And then we have metabolic activities. So vitamin D synthesis starts at our skin. Keratinocytes produce a precursor to vitamin D known as cholecalciferol. Cholecalciferol, which is a pre-vitamin D, that's what I typically call it, is produced upon UV radiation. So when UV radiation hits our skin, it activates the production of cholecalciferol. This is important. This is one of the reasons why we have different pigments, because in areas closer to the equator where we have stronger UV radiation, darker skin can still absorb the radiation. But in environments farther away from the equator, closer to the poles, darker skin wouldn't be able to absorb the radiation as effectively, and because of that, we wouldn't be able to produce vitamin D. So that's one of the reasons we moved from the eumelanin, which was the most common melanin, to the pheomelanin. Individuals that live closer to the poles tend to have that more pale skin. The function of that pale skin, it has some UV protection, but it also allows us to absorb radiation so we can produce vitamin D. So once we produce the cholecalciferol, this is going to move to our liver. Our liver then modifies the cholecalciferol to another precursor. And that precursor moves to our kidneys, where it is converted into calcitriol, the active form of vitamin D. And calcitriol functions in increasing calcium absorption. I'm going to stop here so I can do diseases and injuries all together along with aging. Okay? So I'll have one more video after this one. Bye.